the trumpet sounded, and the alarm went off. The time had come, and the white land trembled. The destiny was unchangeable, and the great catastrophe was approaching more and more. In the days leading up to the day of the deluge, the earth shook and groaned as if in pain. At night, Nibiru shone in the sky as if it were the brightest star. Then there was darkness during the day, and at night the moon seemed to have been swallowed by a monster. The earth shook with an unprecedented force. In Sipar, the Anunnaki awaited the starting signal. They were all gathered. Meanwhile, in his dwelling, Enki fell asleep. It was then that a dream vision enveloped him in mystery and hope. Before him walked a bright and radiant man, as if he were the heavens themselves. And as he approached, he could see that it was Galzu, the white-haired Anunnaki. In his right hand, he held a stylus, and in his left hand, a smooth and shiny lapis lazuli tablet. Galzu said, "Your accusations against Enlil are unjustified, for he was only telling the truth. And the decision, which, as Enlil's decision will be known, I must say was destiny, and not him who made it. Now take fate into your own hands, so that the earthlings can inherit the earth." I come to bring you the will of the Creator of all. Summon your son, Jusudra, and reveal to him the impending calamity, without breaking your oath. Instruct him to build a vessel that can remain submerged. Tell him that the construction to be made must withstand an avalanche of water. The vessel must be similar to the one on this tablet that I present to you. Let him save himself and his family, and let him take with him the seed of everything that is valuable, whether plants or animals. And with the stylus, Galzu drew an image on the tablet. He left the tablet engraved next to Enki's bed. And after the image disappeared, the dream vision ended, and shaking, Enki woke up. The vision was enigmatic but revealing. Enki lay in his bed reflecting with astonishment. What omen could this be? And as he looked around, he saw that the tablet was by his side. What he had dreamed had materialized before him. On the tablet, some measures were visible, and they were the exact measurements of the vessel. Immediately, Enki sent emissaries to find Galzu so that he could speak with him. However, he was surprised. They told him that Galzu had long since returned to Nibiru. Enki was perplexed and struggling to understand such a mystery and omen. Although unable to unravel what had happened, the message was clear. So, secretly that night, Enki went to the reed hut where Ziusudra was sleeping. And in front of the reed hut, Enki spoke not to Ziusudra but to the wall of the hut. Wake up, said Enki to the wall of reeds. Pay attention to my instructions. A storm will fall upon the earth and sweep away all the cities. Humanity and its offspring will all be destroyed. This is the final decision. It is the word of the assembly convened by Enlil. The decision is made and announced by Anu, Enlil, and Ninmah. Now listen to my words and observe the message that I transmit to you. Leave your home, build a boat, renounce your possessions, and save your life. Reed Hut, pay attention. You have only 7 days. Build a boat that can rotate and survive the flood. Make sure the boat is completely covered and that the sun cannot be seen inside it. Its design and measurements are described on a tablet. I will leave it here, next to the wall of the Reed Hut. Remember, you have 7 days. Build the boat and gather your family and relatives. Stack up food and drinking water. Also take domestic animals. Then, on the appointed day, a signal will be given. I will send an Anunnaki as a guide, who will be appointed by me and who knows the waters. He will come to you. On that day, you must get into the boat and close the hatch tightly. A crushing flood coming from the south will devastate the land and all life. The boat will break loose from its moorings, and then it will rotate and spin under the impact of the water. The echo of Enki's voice still rang in Ziusudra's ears when he was awakened by his words. Enki was hiding behind the Reed Hut and speaking in front of the wall. His message was clear. A terrible storm was approaching, and the destruction of all humanity was imminent. Ziusudra understood that he was only his own seed, the salvation of humanity. Ziusudra was paralyzed with fear and fell to his knees, begging to see Enki's face. But Enki refused. He had explained everything that was possible and made it clear that Ziusudra could not see his face. Otherwise, he would die. And if the people ask, continued Enki, say that Lord Enlil was angry with Enki, and that you will sail to the Abzu, so that perhaps Lord Enlil will calm down? Then there was silence, and Ziusudra left the Reed Hut, finding the tablet that Enki had mentioned. On the tablet was a boat drawn just as Enki had described. The tablet glimmered in this moonlight. Ziusudra returned to the hut with only one certainty. Something serious would indeed happen. The next morning, Ziusudra met the people and told them that he was condemned due to Enlil's irritation with Enki. He explained about Enlil's hostility and that he could not even set foot in the Eden. Thus, he should build a boat to find Lord Enki in his domain in the Abzu. Upon hearing the news, the entire town mobilized to assist in building a boat. It was a massive ark, and the people were anxious. Everyone wanted to help and witness Ziusudra's departure, as this would mean speaking with Enki and appeasing Enlil's wrath. In this way, everyone would assist. Many sacrificed their own livelihoods to provide for Enlil. While some carried wood and helped with construction, others applied pitch. Ziusudra called for all who desired to seek the protection of Lord Enki in the Abzu to join the ark. Some artisans heeded his call. And then 6 days passed. It was on the 7th day, the day of the deluge, that Ninagal, the lord of the great waters, Enki's envoy, arrived. He was one of the great Lord Enki's sons and carried with him a cedar wood box. Ziusudra invited Ninagal aboard. The vessel was massive and well-equipped to withstand the imminent storm. So, Ziusudra and Ninagal waited for the 7th day. In the sky, the stars heralded the age of Leo. This was the 120th Shar. This was Ziusudra's 10th Shar of life. Suddenly, a dark cloud appeared on the horizon, obscuring the morning light. At that moment, a strange shadow of death covered the earth. Thunder rumbled and echoed across the planet, while lightning illuminated the skies. In Sipar, Utu gave the signal. "Depart! Depart!" he shouted to the other Anunnaki. The gods rose in their celestial ships toward the sky. Ninagal, Enki's Anunnaki envoy, could see the storm approaching from 18 leagues away. "Lock the door," Ninagal shouted to Ziusudra. His cry echoed throughout Shurabak, announcing the arrival of the greatest storm ever seen. The heavens opened, and a terrifying roar rose from the depths of the earth. Ziusudra and Ninagal, in their hastily constructed boat, felt the water violently agitating the hull. They had to close the gates. In a coordinated movement, both pulled the door that concealed the vessel's only entrance. The construction was completely sealed, and darkness engulfed everything. The waves crashed with force, but inside the vessel, nothing could be heard except the muffled sound of the ocean. The deluge began with a deafening roar, and the whole earth shook. In the white land, at the bottom of the earth, the plates shook the foundations and moved violently. The ice broke and was dragged by the invisible forces of Nibiru's network. Huge blocks of ice collided, fragmenting the icy landscape. Suddenly, a gigantic wave rose, and the sky seemed to touch the sea. A fierce wind arose, blowing the waters to the north. The waters reached the lands of Abzu. From there, the wall of water advanced towards the inhabited lands of Eden. When the wall of water reached Shurubak, the moorings of the ark loosened, and the vessel was swallowed by the waters. Ziusudra and Ninagal felt the vessel being thrown around, as if they were in an aquatic abyss. Outside, the walls of water swallowed those who could not take shelter. The ground vanished, and there was only water on all sides. Before the day could end, the wall of water gained strength and speed, heading towards the high mountains. The Anunnaki observed the earth as they circled in their celestial ships, pressed against the outer walls of the ships. They were anxious to see what was happening on Earth. The waters had covered everything, and the world they knew had been transformed forever. Ninmah cried. She was desperate with what she saw. She said that her creatures were drowning. Inanna also cried, lamenting that everything on Earth had turned into clay. The Anunnaki in the other ships watched with humility and admiration the power of nature. Some spoke of the fruits of the earth. Many desired the pleasure and taste of fermented fruit juice, but it was no longer possible. The Anunnaki consoled each other, certain that everything that existed before was destroyed and had turned to mud. Like a mortal battle, the storm swept people, mountains, and all lands with overwhelming speed. After the huge wave that swept the planet, the floodgates of heaven opened, and a torrential rain flooded the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. The peaks of the great mountains had become small islands in the vast sea that the planet had become. The flood, followed by the torrential rain, had modified all the landscapes of the planet and transformed everything into a great watery planet, reminiscent of the ancient Tiamat. However, in the course of the days, the water began to recede little by little. As in the beginning, the waters joined their basins, and 40 days after the start of the deluge, the rain also ceased. Only Ziusudra's vessel, built under Enki's guidance, had survived. Ziusudra opened the hatch and could see the sunlight. He felt a light breeze on his face. He discovered that the water had receded, and that he was now adrift in a vast and infinite ocean. Ziusudra observed the destruction and lamented the loss of all humanity and all other forms of life. Ziusudra said, "No one survived, except for us. But there is still no solid land for us to walk on." Ninagal, the Anunnaki indicated by Enki, led the boat towards the twin mountains of Arata, where Ziusudra hoped to find solid ground. Impatiently, Ziusudra released birds to check for any signs of life and solid ground. First, he released a swallow, then a raven, but both returned to the boat. Finally, he released a dove, which returned with an olive branch in its beak. Ziusudra had discovered it. There was solid ground nearby. Thus, a few days later, the boat settled on one of the rocks. Ziusudra opened the impenetrable door of the boat and stepped out. Once again, he felt the gentle breeze and saw the sun. He hurriedly called his wife Emzara and their children. Ziusudra then thanked Lord Enki for his survival. With some stones, he built an altar to offer a sacrifice. He chose a sheep and lit the fire, and on the altar he made his offering to Enki, his lord. At that time, in the skies and sheltered by their celestial ships, the Anunnaki observed the waters receding little by little. Enlil looked at Enki and said, "Let us make use of the small ships to descend onto the peak of Arata. Let us observe closely. Let us review what happened and what needs to be done." Thus, Enki and Enlil descended on the peak of Arata, while other Anunnaki, aboard other celestial ships, continued to circle the earth. Upon landing on solid ground, the brothers looked at each other and greeted each other. It was then that the smell of Ziusudra's sacrifice could be felt. "What is this?" Enlil asked. "What is this smell? Where is the fire coming from? The smell of roasted meat? Did someone survive the flood?" He stared at Enki with great anger. Enki responded subtly, "Let's go where the smell leads us and find out what happened." Then the brothers entered the smaller ships again. They flew over the peak of Arata and could see Ziusudra's boat. They landed their ships next to the Great Ark. Ziusudra, Emzara, their children, and the other survivors could be seen, as well as Ninagal, Enki's son. It was then that Enlil had another fit of rage, and his fury knew no bounds. Enlil lunged at Enki. He was willing to kill his brother with his own hands. It was then that Enki revealed to him the greatest of secrets. "He is not a mere mortal. He is my son," Enki shouted, pointing in the direction of Ziusudra. For a brief moment, Enlil doubted what Enki had said. and then he accused him. "You have broken your oath." "No," said Enki. "I spoke to a reed wall. I did not speak directly to Ziusudra, and I did this only because of a dream vision," said Enki. Enki then told Enlil about the dream vision he had and what Galzu, the emissary of the creator of all, had told him. Ninagal, Enki's son, called out to the other Anunnaki who also heard the account of events. When Ninurta and Ninmah heard about it, they did not feel angry. Ninurta said that the survival of humanity was the will of the creator of all. And he said this to his father, Enlil. Ninmah, in turn, vowed never to allow the destruction of humanity again. She spoke these same words while touching her crystal necklace, a gift from her father, Anu. Then she added, "By my oath, the annihilation of humanity will never be repeated." Enlil softened his heart. He realized that the survival of humanity was inevitable. So he approached Ziusudra and his wife Emzara in a gentle and peaceful manner and blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and thus populate the earth." Thus, peace was sealed between the Anunnaki and the Earthlings. The clans of Enki and Enlil had come to a conclusion. Ziusudra and his family survived in the Ark, whose construction had been guided by Enki in a dream vision in direct contact with a message from the creator of all. That was the end of the olden times. The olden times had begun with the first landing and ended with the flood. In those days, the flood had subsided and the Earth's surface was gradually being revealed. The mountains remained untouched, but the valleys were covered in mud and sediment. From their heavenly ships and smaller vessels, the Anunnaki observed the landscapes. Everything that had existed in the ancient cities, in Eden and Abzu, was now buried beneath the mud. Eridu, Nibruki, Shurubak, and Sipar had all vanished, swallowed by the waters and transformed into mud. Everything was entirely gone. From their ships, the Anunnaki circled the Earth, and in the distance they saw the great stone platform atop the Cedar Mountains shimmering in the sunlight. The landing place established in the olden times was still there. The smaller ships touched down on the platform, which was intact. In the launch corners, the enormous stone blocks remained firm. Clearing debris and tree branches, the first to land signaled the other ships, and one by one, the heavenly ships landed on the platform. News was sent to Marduk on Lamu and Nanar on the moon, and they too returned to Earth, landing on the landing platform. Then the Anunnaki and the Igigi gathered, and Enlil called a meeting. Enlil said that they had survived the flood, but the entire Earth had been devastated. All means of recovery must be assessed, whether on Earth or elsewhere. Marduk spoke up saying that Lamu was devastated, its atmosphere sucked away and its waters evaporated by Nibiru's passage. The Lamu they once knew was no more, now a place of dust storms. Nanar added that the moon could not sustain life on its own. One could only stay there with eagle masks, otherwise survival was impossible. Nanar continued, saying that Tiamat's army leader must be immortalized, connected to Earth's fate. Enlil lovingly placed his arms on his son's shoulder, stating that their current priority was survival and sustenance. Enlil summoned Enki, his brother, and announced that they would inspect the sealed creation chamber, searching for the seeds of Nibiru. Next to the platform, they cleared away some mud and found the ancient well. They removed the stone blocking the entrance and entered the sanctuary. They discovered sealed diorite chests and opened them with a copper key, revealing crystal vessels containing Nibiru's grain seeds. They were still there. Enlil handed the seeds to Ninurta, instructing him to build terraces in the mountains so that the grains of Nibiru could grow. This way, they would once again have bread from the cereals. In the Cedar Mountains and other mountains too, Ninurta built dams at the waterfalls, constructed terraces, and taught Ziusudra's eldest son about cultivation and planting. Meanwhile, Enlil assigned his youngest son Ishkur another task. Go where the waters have receded and find any remaining fruit trees. So Ziusudra's youngest son was tasked with fruit cultivation. The first fruit they found was the vine brought by Ninmah. Ziusudra drank its juice and immediately fell asleep as if intoxicated. That's when Enki surprised everyone. He offered a gift to the Anunnaki and the inhabitants of Earth. Enki opened the ark carried by Ninagal and announced that the vital essentials and life eggs could be combined in the wombs of the quadruped animals aboard Ziusudra's vessel. Enki said that sheep would multiply, providing wool and meat, and other living creatures would populate the Earth. Thus, Enki also orchestrated Earth's reconstruction. Dumuzi was assigned the task of herding with the help of Ziusudra's middle son. Then Enki focused on the dark-hued landmass where his and his son's domains were. At the confluence of powerful waters, Ninagal built dams in the mountains and channeled the violent waters of the waterfalls into a lake. Enki, along with Marduk, surveyed the lands between the Abzu and the Great Sea, contemplating how to drain the river valley where dwellings once stood. In the middle of the river, where the river waters cascaded, he raised an island and carved out 2 caves within it. He created stone channels above them, cut 2 channels in the rocks, and shaped 2 straits. This way, the waters flowing from the plateaus could be slowed down or sped up. He regulated the waters using dams and sluice gates, raising the winding river valley through the cave island, the island of Abu. In the land of the 2 Narrows, Enki created a dwelling for Dumuzi and the shepherds. Joy and satisfaction filled the Anunnaki's hearts on Earth. And Enlil relayed the news to Nibiru. However, on the Anunnaki's planet, words of concern were spoken. The damage was not only on Earth and Lamu, but Nibiru too had suffered greatly. The shield made of gold dust was torn, and the atmosphere was thinning once again. New shipments of gold to Nibiru were urgently needed. Enki traveled to the Abzu with his son Jebel, intending to research and search for gold. However, they were met with shocking and disheartening news. All the gold mines had vanished, buried under a massive flood. Enki and Enlil contacted Nibiru and relayed the news to their home planet. They reported that the city of Bad Tibira in Eden no longer existed, and there was no landing place for the ships in Sipar. The hundreds of Anunnaki who worked in the mines and Bad Tibira had vanished from Earth. The Earthlings who had served as primitive workers had turned to clay after the flood. Earth could no longer provide the gold Nibiru so desperately needed. Despair was felt both on Nibiru and Earth. During this time, Ninurta completed his mission in the Cedar Mountains and traveled to the land of mountains across the oceans. From there, he sent astonishing and surprising news. The deluge had cut deeply into the mountainsides, revealing countless amounts of gold in large and small nuggets in the rivers below. The gold was pure and did not require refining or smelting. Ninurta reported that gold was everywhere. Enki and Enlil hurriedly traveled to the distant land of mountains and marveled at the discovery. Pure gold that needed no refining or smelting was abundant. This is a miracle, Enki told Enlil. What was done by Nibiru has been corrected by Nibiru. Enlil responded, the invisible hand of the creator of all allowed life on Nibiru. But the leaders wondered, who could now collect the gold, and how would they be sent to Nibiru? Ninurta had an answer for the first question. On his journey to the high mountain lands across the oceans, he found not only gold, but survivors as well. He revealed to the other Anunnaki that there were 4 surviving brother and sister pairs who had saved themselves on rafts. They were descendants of Kain and knew how to manipulate metals. The survivors were on an island, the mountain's peak transformed into an island. They called Ninurta the Great Protector and remembered him as a guardian of their ancestors. Upon hearing this news, even Enlil, who had planned the end of all Earthlings, was not angered. They all said to themselves and others, "It is the will of the Creator of all." The Anunnaki then created a new landing place for the celestial ships to enable direct travel between the new gold extraction site and Nibiru. They sought a dry, hardened plain and found it near the landing place on a desolate peninsula. The site was flat, like a calm lake, and surrounded by white mountains. To facilitate flight navigation between Earth and Nibiru, Enlil suggested to Enki that they could reproduce the celestial pathways on Earth. They decided to reflect the celestial paths of Anu and Enlil on our planet. Then, Enlil measured the distances of the heavens and marked a grand design on a tablet for everyone on Earth to see. It was decided that the landing place in the Cedar Mountains would be part of the facilities. Next, Enlil measured the distance between the landing place and the place of the ships, designating a new location for a new mission control center at the center. In that position, he selected a suitable hill and named it Mount of Way Showing. Enlil ordered the construction of a stone platform, similar but smaller than the one at the landing place. In the center, a large stone was carved inside and out to house a new link between heaven and earth. A new navel of the earth, a new earth center to establish the function of Nibiru Ki before the flood. The landing shortcut was anchored in the north at the twin peaks of Arata. To mark the landing corridor, Enlil needed 2 more sets of twin peaks to define the corridor's boundaries and ensure ascent and descent. In the southern part of the desolate peninsula, a mountainous area, Enlil chose adjacent twin peaks where he anchored the southern boundary. However, where the second set of twin peaks was needed, there were no mountains. Only a plain above the valley, flooded by waters, rose from the ground. Ningishzida suggested to the other Anunnaki, artificial peaks can be erected on it. So, on a tablet, he drew the image of smooth peaks rising to the sky. If this can be done, let it be, Enlil approved. Let them also serve as beacons. Above the plain, over the river valley, Ningishzida built a model. He perfected the ascending angles and the 4 smooth sides. Next to it, he placed a larger peak, its sides oriented to the 4 corners of the earth. The Anunnaki cut and erected stones with their powerful tools. Beside the first peak, in a precise location, they raised its twin peak. They carefully designed galleries and chambers for pulsating crystals. When this enormous peak rose to the heavens, the leaders were invited to place the capstone on it. Gibbel prepared a mixture of electrum, from which the apex stone was made. The sunlight reflected to the horizon, and it was like a pillar of fire at night. It focused a beam to the heavens, harnessing the power of all the crystals. When the work proposed by Ningishzida was completed, the Anunnaki entered the great twin peaks and marveled at what they saw. They gave it a name and called it Ekur, house which like a mountain is. It was a great beacon for the heavens. They told themselves that the Anunnaki who survived the great flood would always triumph, and so they proclaimed it. Now, the new place of the celestial ships could receive gold from lands beyond the seas, and from there, the ships could depart for Nibiru, carrying survival and leading to salvation. From the east, where the sun rises on the appointed day, they shall ascend. To the southwest, where the sun sets on the appointed day, they shall descend. Then Enlil, with his own hands, activated the crystals of Nibiru. From this, strange lights began to flicker inside, and a captivating hum broke the silence that had been on Earth. Outside, the apex stone suddenly shone, and it became brighter than the sun itself. The crowd of Anunnaki gathered and let out a great and powerful cry of joy. Ninma, moved by the occasion, recited and sang a poem. Ninma thus spoke, "House that is like a mountain, house that faces the sky. It is equipped for heaven-earth. It is the work of the Anunnaki. Bright and dark house, house of heaven and earth, built for the celestial ships, the Anunnaki constructed it. house whose interior glows with a reddish skylight, house whose interior shines with the reddish light of the sky, emits a pulsing ray that reaches far and high. Noble mountain among mountains, created great and noble, it is beyond the understanding of earth dwellers. House of equipment, noble house of eternity, its foundation stones touch the waters, its great circumference is set in the clay. House whose parts are skillfully interwoven, so that the great ones who circle in the heavens may descend to rest. House that is a landmark for spacecraft, with unfathomable innards. Akur is blessed by Anu himself. At the end of Ninma's exaltation song, the Anunnaki continued celebrating their remarkable work. Enki suggested to Enlil, "We need to think of an answer to a puzzling question. When in future days someone asks, when and by whom was this wonder created? Let's build a monument beside the twin mountains to announce the age of the lion. May the face bear the image of Ningishzida, the designer of the mountains, and may it gaze precisely at the place of the celestial ships, so that it reveals to future generations when, by whom, and for what purpose it was created." Enlil agreed with Enki's words and said, "Utu must once again be the commander of the place of the celestial ships. Let the lion look precisely to the east, with the image of Ningishzida." Thus, the work began to carve and shape the lion that celebrated the image of Ningishzida. It was then that Marduk sought Enki, his father, and spoke bitter and angry words of discontent. "You promised me dominion over the entire earth, but now command and glory are granted to others. I am left without lands or tasks. Artificial mountains rise over my former domains. In the image of the lion should be my image, not that of Ningishzida." Marduk's words angered Ningishzida, as well as the other sons. Ninurta and the rest of Enlil's sons also raised their voices, demanding domains in their names. All demanded lands for themselves and earthlings who could worship them. Ninma spoke up before the others, saying, "Let the celebration not become a dispute. The earth is still desolate. Among the earthlings there are only survivors, and we are few Anunnaki. Let us pay heed to Marduk's words. Ningishzida has not been deprived of his honor in Marduk's words." Ninma's voice became a peacemaker between the two clans. Enlil said, "For peace to prevail, we must divide the habitable lands among us." And so they agreed to make the peninsula an undisputed separator. They named it the Land of Missiles, and called it Tilman, a land beyond the reach of earthlings. They entrusted its care to Ninma, the peacemaker. To the east of the peninsula, in the habitable lands, they entrusted them to the care of Enlil and his sons, and for two of Jusudra's sons, Shem and Japheth, to live there. The dark-hued landmass that included Abzu was granted to Enki and his clan for dominion. To inhabit it, they chose the people of Jusudra's middle son, Ham. To appease his son, Enki suggested making Marduk their lord, ruler of their lands. And in this regard, Enlil said, "Let it be as you wish." In Tilman, without its mountainous south, Ninurta built a dwelling for his mother, Ninma. It was located in a valley near a spring with palm trees. On the mountain peak, Ninurta planted a fragrant garden, And when everything was finished, they sent a signal to all the outposts on Earth. From the mountainous lands beyond the ocean, the small ships brought the gold nuggets. From the place of the celestial ships, the gold was taken to Nibiru. And on that memorable day, Enlil and Enki spoke and agreed. May Ninmah, the peacemaker, be honored, and let a new title epithet be offered to her. Ninharsag, mistress of the mountainhead, let it be another of her names. It was the first Shar since the Great Deluge, and tensions were simmering amongst the Anunnaki. The sparks flew when Marduk boldly laid claim to dark-hued land and all its realms. The jostling for territories escalated, and Ninmah, who had been the harmonious voice between the two clans, was bestowed with the title Ninharsag. Thus, Ninmah was hailed as the Earth's peacemaker. The Anunnaki, in one accord, sang praises to her very being. Ninmah, with grace and finesse, steered the ship of order amongst them. Gold was ferried to Nibiru, and in the wake of celebrations, ambitions and rivalries dwindled. The earth, slowly but surely, sprung back to life, enriched by seeds safeguarded by Enki. All flourished anew, blanketing the earth, air, and water with renewed vigor. Yet amongst all treasures unearthed, the remnants of humanity were the crown jewels to the Anunnaki. It was reminiscent of yore, when the primitive workers were forged. Now, the Anunnaki, fewer in number and weary, yearned for the toil of civilized human hands. And so unfolded the first Shar post-deluge. However, peace was breached not by a tussle between Marduk and Ninurta, or a direct squabble between the clans of Enki and Enlil. Turmoil erupted when Marduk's very own progeny, aided by the Ugiji, tore asunder the calm and peace woven by Ninmah. The 11th tablet of the Lost Book of Enki unveils characters of ancient Egypt. Some tales in the Lost Book of Enki clash with other traditional and well-known myths of ancient Egypt, like the famed myth of Osiris. In the Lost Book of Enki, the myth takes a different path and shall be upheld as depicted in the book that lays the foundation for all tablets. To craft this tablet with fluidity and a rich tapestry of details for a comprehensive experience, I shall provide some introductory elucidation. Amongst an array of concepts, places, and characters, I'd like to first draw your attention to definitions concerning Sati and Seth. Sati is the third offspring of Adapa and Titi. He is the biblical Seth. Satu is the child of Marduk and Sarpanit, the Egyptian god known as Seth. In the milieu of the Anunnaki tablets, Sati makes an entrance in Tablet 8 as the firstborn of Adapa and Titi, following the demise of Abael and the exile of Cain. He is the biblical Seth. The Egyptian god who shares this name, Seth, was dubbed Satu in the context of the 9th tablet, and his name was kept intact as it appears on those pages, out of reverence for the original work. Satu in that milieu was introduced alongside his brother Asar, portrayed as the progeny of Marduk and Sarpanit. Asar is explained to be the Egyptian god Osiris, so in this tablet, and henceforth, we'll be acquainting ourselves with other characters from ancient Egypt, such as Isis, who goes by Asta in the Lost Book of Enki, or Nephthys, who is Seth's sister wife and is referred to as Nebat in the Book of Enki, in addition to Horus, termed Horon in the Book of Enki. Throwing so many names into the mix, stirring up diverse cultures, could cause quite the muddle. That's why this clarification is in order. In the reimagined Anunnaki backdrop, in Egypt, in this and the Mex tablets, other deities will go by different names, like Enki, known as the god Ptah, Ningishita as Thoth or Tehuti, and Marduk as Ra. This transformation will unfold in the context of the 12th tablet. In a nutshell, for the context of this tablet and moving forward, keep an eye on the following correspondences. Satu, the offspring of Marduk and Sarpanit, is the Egyptian god Seth and will henceforth be referred to as such. Asar, another scion of Marduk and Sarpanit, will from now on be called Osiris. Asta, daughter of Shamgaz, will go by the name Isis. Nebat, also a daughter of Shamgaz, will be known as Nephthys. Horon will answer to the name Horus. These names, Satu, Asar, Asta, Nebat, and Horon, will from this point be retired, and only their more familiar Egyptian names will be used. And now, let us march forward with this tale that unveils the rich tapestry woven by the intermingling of Sumerian and Egyptian cultures, shedding light on key aspects of the Anunnaki sojourn on Earth. When Marduk and Sarpanit were in Lamu, waiting for the end of the deluge, Osiris and Seth, the couple's children, fell in love with the daughters of Shamgaz, the leader of the Igigi. When they returned to Earth, the two brothers chose wives. Osiris married Isis, and Seth committed himself to Nephthys. Osiris chose to stay in the dark-hued land with his father Marduk, while Seth established his residence near the landing place, where the Igigi and Shamgaz dwelled. Restless with earthly domains, Shamgaz questioned and instigated other Igigi. What about the Igigi? Shouldn't they be lords? Nephthys constantly brought these thoughts to Seth. With his father, Osiris would be the sole heir of the fertile lands. Thus, Shamgaz and his daughter Nephthys whispered to Seth, weaving plans to maintain control over the succession. Thus, they organized a feast. They invited the Igigi and the Anunnaki. Unaware, Osiris joined the celebration with his brother. Nephthys, his wife's sister, adorned herself and sang a song to Osiris while playing the lyre. Seth served succulent meat to Osiris, and Shamgaz offered him new wine in a chalice, mixed with an elixir. Osiris was in a good mood. He sang joyfully and took part in the music, playing the cymbals. Later, under the effect of the drink and the elixir offered by Shamgaz, Osiris fell to the ground. "Let him rest," said the hosts. And so they took Osiris to another chamber. They led him to a coffin and closed it with strong clasps, throwing it into the sea. Upon learning of what had happened, Isis wept profusely for the death of her husband. Osiris's coffin was found by the seaside in the dark-hued land. His lifeless body lay inside, stiff and cold. The breath of life had escaped from his nostrils. Marduk, devastated, tore his garments and covered his forehead with ashes. My son! My son!" lamented Sarpanit, immersed in grief and sadness. Disturbed, Enki cried out, "The curse of Cain repeats itself," he exclaimed in agony to his son, Marduk. Isis raised a lament to the heavens and pleaded with Marduk for revenge and an heir. Seth must meet his inevitable fate and punishment. However, I beg you, allow me to conceive a successor from his own seed, and may your son be remembered by his name so that his lineage may survive. That unfortunately cannot be done, Enki replied to Marduk and Isis. Isis was perplexed and deeply troubled, deciding to challenge the orders. Before the body of Osiris was wrapped and preserved in the sanctuary, Isis, with skill and cunning, extracted the essence of life from her beloved Osiris. Through this daring act, Isis conceived the heir and avenger of Osiris. Before Enki and his sons, before Marduk and other Anunnaki, Seth proclaimed his word, "I am the sole heir and successor of Marduk, and thus I shall be the lord of the land of the two Narrows." However, before the council of the Anunnaki, Isis contested the claim. She revealed that she had a child with Osiris. Before the council, Isis stated that she had become pregnant with the legitimate heir. Hidden among the reeds of the river, the son of Osiris and Isis grew up, thus avoiding Seth's wrath. The son of Osiris and Isis was named Horus, and Horus was conceived, raised, and duly prepared to be the avenger of his father. Seth was stunned, while Shamgaz did not abandon his ambitions. Year after year, the Igigi and their offspring spread across the earth, from the landing place to the borders of Tilman, the sacred region of Ninmah. They approached closer and closer, threatening to invade the place of the celestial chariots. In the dark-hued land, the young Horus grew rapidly and, driven by the cycles of life on Earth, soon became a hero. Horus grew under the care of his great-uncle Gibel and was instructed and trained by him. Gibel granted him winged sandals, like those of a falcon, so that he could freely soar through the skies. He also offered a divine harpoon, whose arrows were like missiles. In the highlands of the south, Gibel taught Horus the arts of metalworking and forging, revealing to him the secret of a precious metal, iron. With such material, Horus forged weapons and gathered an army of earthly beings with the aim of challenging Seth and the Igigi in the north. Thus, the conflict was imminent, and together they marched by land and river until they reached the border of Tilman, the land of the missiles. Observing the army, Seth positioned himself, and he challenged Horus. "Between the two of us, the conflict lies. Let us face each other in one-on-one combat." Soon, the battle in the skies began. It was in the city of Tilman, the sacred region of Ninmah. Seth awaited in his spacecraft, ready for the battle against Horus. Soaring through the air like a falcon, Horus was struck by Seth's poisoned arrow, causing him to fall like the venom of a scorpion. Isis witnessed it all, but her mother's heart couldn't believe what her eyes saw. She called upon the heavens for Ningishzida. From his celestial ship, Ningishzida came to Horus's aid, descending to rescue the fallen hero in response to his mother's plea. With his magical powers, Ningishita transformed the poison into benign blood, and by daybreak Horus was healed and reborn from the dead. Then, in a column of fire, like a blazing celestial fish, Ningishita provided Horus with the strength needed to confront Seth. Ascending to the sky towards his adversary, they engaged in a long and arduous pursuit. The battle was intense and lethal. First, Horus's column of fire was struck, but with his divine harpoon, he managed to strike Seth. As Seth fell to the ground, he was captured and bound by Horus. Horus then went to the council of the Anunnaki, carrying his uncle Seth. As foreseen and properly trained, he had become the avenger of his father. Seth, though still alive, was blind and had his private parts crushed. He stood there like a discarded object. It was decided that Seth, now blind and unable to have heirs, should live but be exiled. The council sentenced Seth to spend the rest of his days among the Igigi as a mere mortal. Triumphant, Horus was declared the heir to his father Osiris's throne, and so Horus ascended to the throne. The council's decision was recorded on a metal tablet and placed in the Hall of Records. Marduk was pleased with the decision, but saddened by what had transpired. Despite being Osiris's son, Horus descended from Shamgaz, the leader of the Igigi. Therefore, he was not granted dominion among the great Anunnaki. Marduk and Sarpanit sought solace in each other. And so, with time, another son was born. That was Nabu, the possessor of prophecy. But the dispute between Horus and Seth also found other paths and developments. After the battle over the Tillman area, Enlil summoned his 3 sons to a council. Concerned about the recent events, Enlil said to them, "In the beginning, we created the earthlings in our image and likeness. But now the descendants of the Anunnaki resemble the earthlings. Cain killed his brother, and now a son of Marduk is also a brother's killer." For the first time in history, the descendants of the Anunnaki have raised an army of earthlings, and metal weapons, a secret of the Anunnaki, have been placed in their hands. Since the days when Alalu and Anzu challenged our legitimacy, the disturbance and disobedience of the Igigi persist. Enlil continued in a bellicose and perplexed tone. Under the dominion of Marduk, the peaks of the lighthouses are hidden. They are besieged, where the Igigi protect the landing place. Thus the Igigi advance towards the place of the celestial chariots. They proclaim in the name of Seth and intend to establish themselves in all the heaven-earth facilities. Enlil, realizing the intention of the Igigi, shared his concern with his sons and proposed the creation of an alternative heaven-earth facility. Enlil wished to establish it in the land of Ninurta, beyond the oceans, and to secretly surround it with earthlings he trusted. Thus, the secret mission was entrusted to Ninurta, who set out in search of the ideal location. In the mountains beyond the oceans, next to an immense lake, Ninurta established the new heaven-earth bond, protected by an enclosure. Then, he chose a firm soiled plain, where he marked the points of ascent and descent. The facilities, although primitive, would serve their purpose. Ninurta communicated his success to Enlil, ensuring that the shipments of gold to Nibiru would continue and that if necessary they could ascend from that location. However, at that time, what began as a blessing had a terrible outcome. Dumuzi, Enki's youngest son, had fallen madly in love with Inanna, Nanar's daughter. Inanna, granddaughter of Enlil, was also in love with Dumuzi, the Lord of Shepherding. It was an unconditional love that engulfed two young individuals, consuming them with a passionate and enigmatic fervor. The love songs that echoed through the ages were first sung by Inanna and Dumuzi, immortalizing their love in each verse. Enki, the Wise, designated Dumuzi, his youngest son, with a vast domain over the Abzu. Meluha, the Black Land, as it was called, where imposing trees grew and abundant waters flowed. Great bulls roamed among the river reeds, and countless herds filled their lands. Mountains of silver and shining copper like gold were parts of his kingdom. Dumuzi was greatly loved, and after the death of Osiris, he was favored by Enki. However, envy corroded the heart of his younger brother Marduk. Inanna, daughter of Nanar and Ningal, was nurtured by Enlil since her birth. Her beauty was indescribable, and she competed in martial arts with the Anunnaki heroes. She learned about celestial travels and celestial ships from her brother Utu. A celestial ship of her own was presented to her by the Anunnaki to navigate the skies of Earth. After the flood, on the landing platform, the gazes of Dumuzi and Inanna met, sealing a mysterious destiny. And thus, a warm encounter took place between them. They hesitated at first. He belonged to Enki's clan, and she was a descendant of Enlil. When Ninmah united the rival clans in search of peace, Inanna and Dumuzi secretly met away from the eyes of either clan and confessed their love to each other. Walking together, they exchanged sweet words of passion and enchantment. They lay side by side, hearts in harmony, and Dumuzi, filled with desire, embraced Inanna. "Let me teach you, whispered Dumuzi to Inanna. She kissed him gently and then spoke of her mother, Ningal. What lie would I tell? What words should be spoken? They decided to reveal their sincere love for each other. They planned for it to be a joyous occasion, and the scent of cedar would be used to receive the blessing. Thus, the lovers went to meet Ningal, Inanna's mother. Ningal blessed them, and Inanna's mother approved of Dumuzi. Ningal said, "Lord Dumuzi, as Nanar's son-in-law, you are worthy." Dumuzi was received as a groom by Nanar and announced by Utu, Inanna's brother. Enlil spoke to all those present. A marriage could be the key to peace between the clans. At that moment, while Dumuzi shared his love and engagement with his father and brothers, Enki also glimpsed the possibility of a unifying union and granted his blessing to Dumuzi. The joy of the engagement infected Dumuzi's brothers, except for one. That one was Marduk. Gibel carved a bridal bed of gold, and Nergal sent blue lapis lazuli stones. To please Inanna, sweet dates, her favorite fruit, were piled up next to the bed. Beneath the fruits, lapis lazuli stones lay hidden, waiting to be discovered by Inanna. According to tradition, one of Dumuzi's sisters was tasked with perfuming and dressing the bride. That sister was Geshtinana, and her epithet meant the one to be healed. Inanna unveiled her deepest aspirations for the future alongside Dumuzi to Geshtinana. She envisioned a grand nation where Dumuzi, a great Anunnaki, would ascend. His name would be hailed above all others, and she would become his queen. Together, they would rule and bring rebellious nations under their control. Dumuzi would be granted power and govern the nation with fairness. Geshtinana, startled by Inanna's immense ambition, reported the visions and ambitions for a new government to Marduk. Marduk was disturbed. Inanna's ambition and the idea of a new government with Dumuzi were an affront to him. So Marduk confided a secret plan to Geshtinana, and then Geshtinana went to the shelter of her brother Dumuzi, disguised with an enchanting and perfumed appearance. She whispered to Dumuzi, "Before you rest with your young wife in your arms, you must conceive a legitimate heir, born of a sister. A child born through Inanna will have no right to succession and will not be raised in the presence of his mother." With a gentle touch, she placed her hand on his and approached him, saying, "My brother, I shall lie with you. Together we shall have a descendant of Enki, and the dual seed shall prevail." Thus, Geshtinana whispered to Dumuzi, aiming to generate a noble lineage within her womb. Dumuzi surrendered to desire, and then he poured his seed into Geshtinana's womb and fell asleep. In the night, a dream befell Dumuzi. It was a revelation of impending death. In the dream, 7 wicked bandits invaded his dwelling. They said, "The master has sent us to you, son of Dutur." They drove away his sheep and seized his lambs and goats. They stole the crown of his majesty, stripped him of his royal attire, violently shattered his shepherd's staff, and toppled his chalice. Deprived of everything and chained, he was left to perish in the name of the bird prince and the falcon. Dumuzi woke up in the heart of the night, terrified and disturbed. He recounted the dream to Geshtinana. She warned him, "The omen is not favorable. Marduk will accuse you of violating me and bring upon you a curse. He will send emissaries to arrest you. He will dishonor you and sever your relationship with an Enlilite." Dumuzi roared ferociously, "Betrayal! Betrayal!" And then he pleaded for help from Utu, Inanna's brother, and invoked the name of his father Enki as a protective talisman. Dumuzi embarked on a journey across the desert of Imush, the desert of serpents, seeking refuge in a place adorned with majestic waterfalls, fleeing from his malevolent pursuers. Upon reaching a spot where the waters flowed, making the rocks smooth and slippery, Dumuzi lost his balance and fell. The rushing waters carried his lifeless body in frothy foam, delivering him to the emissaries of evil who captured him. The lifeless body of Dumuzi was recovered from the waters of the lake by Ninagal. Thus, he carried Dumuzi's body to the realm of Nergal and Ereshkigal in the lower Abzu. On a stone slab lay the motionless body of Dumuzi, Enki's son. Upon knowing of what had happened, Enki tore his garments and covered Dumuzi with ashes, lamenting, "My son, my son, what have I done to be so severely punished?" And he questioned aloud, "I, Ei, whose house is the water, brought forth the waters that propelled the celestial ships and landed on earth. A torrent of waters devastated the earth. My grandson Osiris perished in the waters, and now my beloved Dumuzi meets the same fate, also in the waters. All that I did with just cause. Why am I punished? Why has fate turned against me?" Enki wept and mourned. When Geshtinana revealed the truth behind the events, Enki's anguish increased. Meanwhile, Inanna the bride was enveloped in a veil of concern and deep sorrow. The disappearance and death of her beloved Dumuzi were an absolute catastrophe. Determined to retrieve her lover's body to give him a dignified burial, Inanna descended into the depths of the lower Abzu. Her sister Ereshkigal, the queen of those domains, was alerted to Inanna's arrival at the temple gates and suspected a deceitful plot. At each of the 7 gates leading to Ereshkigal's throne, one by one, Inanna's possessions were stripped away. Despoiled and defenseless, Inanna was accused of conspiring to have an heir with Nergal, Dumuzi's brother. Ereshkigal, consumed by anger, did not allow Inanna to explain herself. She ordered her vizier Namtar to unleash 60 terrible diseases upon her sister. Inanna's disappearance in the lower Abzu alarmed her parents. Nanar sought Enlil, who in turn sent a message to Enki. Upon learning of the situation from Nergal, Ereshkigal's son and husband, Enki acted swiftly. He fashioned 2 emissaries from the clay of the Abzu, beings without blood, immune to the rays of death. He sent them to the lower Abzu with the mission of bringing back Inanna, whether alive or dead. When they encountered Ereshkigal, the emissaries caused her bewilderment. Unable to discern their origin, the queen asked if they were Anunnaki or beings of the earth. Namtar attacked them with magical weapons, but the 2 remained unharmed. And so, they reached the lifeless body of Inanna. It was hanging on a stake. The emissaries created by Enki used the pulsator and the emitter. Then they sprinkled the water of life upon her and placed the plant of life in her mouth. Inanna opened her eyes, and then she took a breath of life. Thus, Inanna arose in the realm of the dead. As they prepared to take Inanna back to the upper world, she ordered them to also take the lifeless body of Dumuzi. At the 7 gates of the lower Abzu, Inanna's adornments and utensils were returned to her. She instructed the emissaries to take Dumuzi to the Black Land, where they should wash him with pure water, anoint him with sweet oil, and dress him in a red shroud, placing him upon a lapis lazuli slab. There, they were to carve a resting place in the rocks and wait for the day of rebirth. Inanna, thirsting for revenge, made her way to Enki's abode. She sought vengeance for the death of her beloved and demanded the death of the culprit, Marduk. Enki whispered softly, "There have already been enough deaths." Marduk provoked, but did not act upon it. Inanna, consumed by despair and a craving for justice, cried out to the heavens. Vengeance and justice should befall Marduk. In Enlil's dwelling, Inanna and Utu, her children, gathered in council to discuss the strategies for the impending war. Ninurta, who had previously defeated the rebellious Anzu, demanded more drastic actions. Utu revealed whispers of the secret words exchanged between Marduk and the Agigi. Enlil then agreed that Earth needed to be liberated. He stated that Marduk was like a malevolent serpent, representing a poison. In this manner, Enki received the demand for Marduk's surrender. Thus, amidst the mourning for Dumuzi, Enki summoned his children to defend Marduk, his firstborn and heir. Enki said, "I still mourn the departure of my beloved Dumuzi, however, I must defend the rights of Marduk." Despite the evil instigated by Marduk, Dumuzi did not die by his hands, and thus Enki declared that Marduk should be protected by all. Gibil and Ninagal answered their father's call, while Ningish-Zida opposed and Nergal hesitated, promising aid only in the face of mortal danger. And so, a war of unparalleled ferocity erupted between the two clans. The battle was no longer between the descendants of the Earthlings, but between the Anunnaki, born on Nibiru, engaged in a conflict that extended beyond their original world. The war began when Inanna, the instigator of the war, crossed the domains of Enki's children in her spaceship, pursuing Marduk, who took refuge in the territories of Ninagal and Gibil. Ninurta, coming to his aid, unleashed devastating rays from the Stormbird, while Ishkur attacked with blazing lightning and crushing thunder. In the Abzu, the rivers were deprived of fish, and the cattle scattered across the fields. Marduk retreated to the north, to the artificial mountains. Relentlessly, Ninurta unleashed poisoned missiles upon the dwellings, and his devastating weapon deprived the people of those lands of their senses. The channels, once filled with river waters, turned blood red. As the terrifying battles spread to the north, Marduk hid in the Ekur. Gibil granted him an invisible shield, and Nergal raised the all-seeing eye to the sky. With a brilliant weapon, Inanna attacked the hidden place. Horus emerged in defense of his grandfather, and the brightness of Inanna's weapon damaged his right eye. Utu contained the Igigi and their horde of terrestrial beings beyond Tilman, at the foot of the artificial mountains. The Anunnaki from both clans clashed and started a great battle at the foot of the artificial mountains. Enlil sent words to Enki to seal the peace. Let Marduk surrender, let the bloodshed end. Ninmah sent other words to Enki. Let brother speak to brother, she said. In his hiding place within the Ekur, Marduk persisted and defied his pursuers. In the house that resembles a mountain, his final resistance was fought. Inanna failed to overcome the imposing stone structure, as its smooth sides deflected her weapons. But cunningly, Ninurta discovered a secret entrance. And then he rotated the stone located to the north of the Great Pyramid. Through a dark corridor, Ninurta advanced, reaching the immense gallery, its ceiling shining with the diverse colors of crystals like a sparkling rainbow. But Marduk became aware of the invasion and awaited Ninurta with weapons in hand. Ninurta directed his weapons at the shimmering crystals and entered the gallery. Marduk retreated to the upper chamber, to the place of the great pulsating stone. At the entrance, Marduk closed the sliding stone locks, preventing anyone who dared to challenge him from entering. Inside the Ekur, Inanna and Ishkur also entered and followed Ninurta. Then Ninurta, Inanna, and Ishkur discussed what could be done. May the chamber where Marduk hides be his stone sepulcher. Ishkur pointed to the 3 stone blocks arranged to slide down. The 3 obstructing stones are ready to slide, he said. May death be slow, may he be buried alive, and may it be Marduk's verdict, said Inanna. Thus, each of them cleared one of the stones. The 3 obstructing stones were released to bury Marduk like in a tomb. Each of them slid a stone to obstruct, sealing Marduk like in a grave. And then the stones fell into a deep abyss, far from the sun and light. Without food or water, Marduk lay in the Ekur. Sarpanit, his wife, mourned his imprisonment and punishment without trial. She sought Enki, her father-in-law, accompanied by her youngest son Nabu. She said Marduk's life must be restored. Enki asked Utu and Nanar to intercede with Inanna. So they brought Sarpanit's words for Marduk to live in penitential garments, to live humbly, and to renounce power. However, Inanna would not be appeased. She said, "For the sake of honor, the instigator must succumb," Inanna retorted. Ninmah, the peacemaker, gathered the brothers Enki and Enlil. She said, "Marduk deserves punishment, but death is not justified," she asserted. "Let Marduk be in exile and let succession on earth be granted to Ninurta." Enlil was pleased with the words and smiled. Ninurta was his son with Ninmah. "As a father, what choice do I have between succession and life?" With a heavy heart, Enki continued, "In my lands, desolation spreads. The war must come to an end. I still weep for Dumuzi. So let Marduk live in exile," Enlil said. "If peace is to reign and Marduk is to live, agreements and compromises must be made." And so, Enlil observed his advantage, intending to be the foremost among the brothers. He raised his voice and continued, "All the facilities that connect heaven and earth must be entrusted solely to me. Dominion over the land of the 2 Narrows must be handed over to another son. The Agigi who follow Marduk must be directed to relinquish the landing place and abandon their alliance and commitment to Marduk. Marduk must be led to a land of no return, where no descendant of Ziusudra resides. Thus, Marduk must depart into exile." Enki recognized the hand of fortune in his heart. "So be it," he said, bowing his head. The name of Ningishida was mentioned shortly thereafter in 2 ways. He was designated for the rescue of Marduk and also to be the lord of the lands of Ekur. It was said that Ningishida was knowledgeable of the secrets of Ekur. When the great Anunnaki announced their decrees, Ningishida was called upon to perform the rescue. His challenge was to extract Marduk from the blocked depths, from the bowels of the Great Pyramid. Saving Marduk, buried alive, was a mission that exceeded his own conception. Ningishida studied the hidden designs of Ekur and devised a plan to overcome the obstacles. Then he said, "Through a carved upper opening, Marduk will be liberated. and he revealed his plan to the leaders. Ningishita spoke, "In a location I will show you. We will open a door in the stones, and from there we will trace a winding path, forging a rescue axis. Through the hidden recesses, we will enter the heart of Ekur. At the epicenter of the chambers, we will break through the rocks. Opening a door inward, we will bypass the blockades. Through the Grand Gallery, we will proceed, raising the 3 stone barriers, and we will reach the highest chamber, the deadly prison of Marduk." Thus, the Anunnaki, guided by Ningishita, pursued their meticulous plan. With tools that cleaved the rocks, they opened the entrance and shaped the rescue shaft. They penetrated into the interior of the ingenious mountain and created a passage. Circumventing the 3 stone barriers, they reached the highest chamber. On a narrow platform, they erected the iron gates and rescued the unconscious Marduk. With caution, through the winding shaft, they led Marduk to the fresh air. Outside, Sarpanit and Nabu, wife and son, awaited. And finally, an emotional reunion took place. Then Enki conveyed the conditions of his release. But Marduk became enraged. Before his eyes, it was a colossal humiliation. Marduk said, "I'd rather die than renounce my inheritance." Sarpanit drew Nabu close to her arms. "We are part of your future," Sarpanit whispered. Marduk, enraged and humiliated, uttered, "I surrender to my destiny." Sarpanit and Nabu then accompanied the desolate Marduk and thus embarked on an irreversible land. They arrived in a forbidden land where horned beasts are hunted. "I surrender to my destiny." After Marduk's departure, Ninurta entered the Ekur once again through its entrance. He proceeded through the corridors towards a mysterious structure. There, on the eastern wall, a small artistic opening radiated a reddish glow. It was the crimson brilliance of the Stone of Destiny. Tormented, Ninurta exclaimed in anguish, "Its power captures me to kill me, subjugating me with a deadly attraction," Ninurta shouted from within the chamber. Then he ordered them to take the stone and destroy it completely. Retracing his steps, Ninurta entered the Grand Gallery and reached the highest chamber. In a chest carved from stone, the heart of the Ekur pulsed. The force of its network expanded through 5 compartments. Ninurta struck the chest, which responded with a resonance. Then he ordered the removal of the Gug stone, a crystal of beams that determined directions, and for it to be transported to a place of his choosing. Descending through the vast gallery, Ninurta examined the 27 pairs of crystals originating from Nibiru. Many were damaged in the battle against Marduk, while others, still intact, survived the fight. Ninurta instructed that the intact ones be removed from their niches, while the others he pulverized with his rays. Then, outside the Ekur, the Great Pyramid, house which, like a mountain is, took flight on its blackbird towards the apex stone. He carefully observed the supreme symbol of his enemy. With his weapons, he released the symbol and caused it to crumble into pieces on the ground. "With this, the fear of Marduk is finished," declared Ninurta, victorious. On the battlefield, the gathered Anunnaki praised Ninurta. They said, "You resemble Anu," they shouted to their hero and leader. To replace the disabled beacon, a mountain near the place of the celestial chariots was chosen. Within its depths, the rescued crystals were placed. At its peak, the Gug stone, the stone of direction, was installed. The mountain was then named Mount Mashu, the mount of the supreme celestial bark. Then Enlil summoned his 3 sons. Ninlil and Ninmah were also present. They confirmed their command over the ancient lands and assigned lordships over the new lands. Ninurta, the son of Enlil, who had defeated Anzu and Marduk, was given the powers previously granted to Enlil to replace his father in all the lands. Ishkur was granted dominion over the landing place in the Cedar Mountains. Thus, Ishkur's new domains merged with his existing domains in the north. Nanar was granted the lands to the south and east, where the Igigi and their offspring had spread. The peninsula where the place of the celestial chariots stood was included in Nanar's lands. Utu was declared the commander of the place and of the navel of the earth. In the land of the two Narrows, as agreed, lordship was granted to Ningishzida through Enki. None of the other sons of Enki opposed this concession. However, Inanna resisted. For the inheritance of Dumuzi, her deceased betrothed, Inanna claimed. And from Enlil, Inanna demanded a domain solely for herself. The leaders pondered on how to satisfy Inanna's demands and sought advice from the great Anunnaki who decreed fates. They decided to seek clarification from Anu regarding the events on Earth and the division of territories. Since the Great Calamity, in the times of the Deluge, almost 2 shars had passed. The Earthlings moved from the mountainous lands and returned to the lowlands. They were descendants of civilized humanity through Zusudra and were mixed with the seed of the Anunnaki. The descendants of the Igigi who intermarried roamed the lands, and in distant lands, the descendants of Kain also survived. Few and noble, the Anunnaki who came from Nibiru were their perfect descendants. The great Anunnaki pondered on how to establish settlements for themselves and for the Earthlings. The questions revolved around how to maintain their nobility over humanity and how to ensure that the many and vast masses of Earthlings would obey and serve the few. How could they remain elevated above humanity? Amidst all this regarding the future, the leaders exchanged words with Anu. And it was then that Anu, the mighty king of Nibiru, decided to return to Earth once again, accompanied by Antu, his wife, who also wished to visit Earth.